Every town has a dark side.
A community will gather tonight to remember a mother killed 8 years ago in Midlothian, southwest of Dallas.
This April will mark 8 years since the murder of Missy Bevers. The wife and mother of 3 was killed in a Midlothian church.
Mother and fitness trainer Terry Missy Bevers was murdered inside a Midlothian church.
So 8 years ago today, somebody wearing tactical gear murdered a mother inside an Ellis County church.
Her killer's never been found.
In the early morning hours of April 18th of 2016, a woman was brutally murdered inside a place that's supposed to be safe, a church. Missy Bevers, a mother, wife, and beloved fitness instructor, was attacked by somebody who left the murder weapon behind, was caught on camera, and whose car was potentially seen nearby the crime scene driving erratically. And yet, despite all this evidence, the killer has never been identified. And as a result, almost 9 years later, this case remains unsolved. Hey guys, it's Andrew, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of Everytown, where today we're headed just outside of Dallas to dig into the strange and tragic case surrounding Missy. And we'll cover all the clues and go through the evidence, and maybe together we can help shed some light on this enduring mystery. So let's head on down to Midlothian, Texas, and uncover the truth behind the murder of Missy Bevers. Missy was a woman who had always stood out in her community because of her kindness, warmth, and dedication to teaching fitness. Born and raised in the great state of Texas herself, she was an extroverted type of lady with an undeniably contagious energy. So for her, she was never going to get a job just sitting behind a desk pushing papers. She was going to be keeping things moving as she always did. Her childhood was full of outdoorsy trips and lots of sports. Coming from a family that taught the values of hard work and commitment, Missy would go on to college, and after that, she met and married Brandon Bevers, and the pair had 3 daughters together, and life was good. Amidst her responsibilities as a mother, which she thoroughly enjoyed, Missy continued on with her passion for fitness and joined the Camp Gladiator program, which is a popular outdoor group fitness class in the Lone Star State. As an instructor, Missy's classes became a place where people found not only a physical challenge, but also a community of individuals eager to help one another in reaching their goals.
I know Missy on so many levels, and her positive attitude, her great spirit, the scriptures and godly stuff that we shared as women together, there's no doubt in my mind that she was living her purpose.
And this was where the passion was for her. Missy didn't just teach exercises. She inspired her students to push beyond their own limits, believe in themselves, and she liked to watch people change for the better and transform themselves into the best version they could possibly be. And really, her life can't be told in just a couple of paragraphs. The reach she had in touching so many lives, including her family's, was far. But it's important to know because what happened to her is senselessly tragic, and her story deserves a proper ending. One where whoever is responsible gets what they deserve, and Missy's family can get a little bit of closure on the darkest chapter, no doubt, of their lives. On the morning of April 18th of 2016, as usual, 45-year-old Missy had planned a nice outdoor workout routine for her Camp Gladiator students in one of the areas she regularly used for those morning classes. However, that day, persistent rains had made the ground pretty muddy, and the threat of more storms forced a last-minute change of plans. And this move was nothing crazy. It wasn't even unusual, as whenever the weather was bad, the class moved inside of the Creekside Church of Christ. But on this particular day, this small change would prove to be the starting point of this whole horrific tragedy. Missy arrived early to the church to set everything up before her students arrived. Very early, in fact, as surveillance cameras caught her in the parking lot a little after 4 a.m., so she could bring stuff in and have everything ready to roll for the 5 a.m. class. When a small group of them showed up, they entered through the large front doors and the place was eerily still. That energy that Missy gave off had been snuffed out in a horrifying display. And there on the floor, she was dead, lying in a pool of blood with multiple puncture wounds all across her body. Around her some tools, a hammer, presumably the items used in the killing. And quickly, someone tried to help her, but they soon realized it was too late. And the scene was bewildering, terrifying, and completely out of place in that space, and in a town like Midlothian. And the police got to work. Obviously, they were looking at a homicide, but who did it and why? I mean, was this a random act with Missy being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or was she perhaps targeted? Initially, the police felt like there was a good possibility that this was in fact a chance encounter, that the perpetrator was likely there to steal stuff from the church, thinking that in the early morning hours no one would be there. Then, when they came upon Missy in that hallway, they were startled and just killed her before fleeing. The thing about that angle, though, is that nothing of value was missing. On top of that, Missy's own cell phone, iPad, and wallet were left right there in the open. And could someone have planned on robbing, freaked out when they saw Missy, killed her, and then forgot to rob stuff? It's possible, but that doesn't really sound likely. And luckily for the detectives, the church was equipped with a surveillance camera system, while the ones outside were not functioning at that time. And the same cameras that saw Missy moving her equipment into the church could be the same ones that caught the killer, which would make this an open and shut case. Only not so fast, because while the footage did provide some valuable insights, it simply wasn't enough to make any substantial progress. And here's why.
There was surveillance video from that morning, now grimly familiar to many. A mysterious person in tactical gear with a...
In going through the tapes, which were captured around 4:15 a.m., the video shows an unknown individual dressed head to toe in police tactical gear, something like a SWAT team member would wear, methodically wandering the church's hallways. And this suspect, clad in a black helmet, army camo pants, gloves, and a police-marked vest, can be seen smashing glass in various spots and attempting to open doors. And they have their hammer on them and other tools, and so the idea that this was a crime of opportunity didn't fit the mold. This person got ready and had definitely planned. The question was, though, was this a robbery they wanted to pull off, or was Missy actually the intended target? And while this unknown individual is making their way through the halls, Missy, meanwhile, is grabbing her gear out of the truck, unaware that she was about to come face to face with her killer. At 4:18 a.m., that's the last time anyone sees her on camera, walking back inside. Despite extensive analysis from lots of experts in the field who scrutinized the tapes, the suspect's identity still remains a total mystery. And so much so, in fact, that they don't even officially know if this person is male or female. The individual's distinct walking gait, which appears somewhat feminine and impaired, has been pored over, including by forensic podiatrist Dr. Michael Nierenberg. And police wondered if this person were injured or had something wrong with one of their legs. However, it was Dr. Nierenberg who concluded that the strange walking was likely caused by the heavy gear that they were not used to wearing. And the perpetrator actually stumbles a few times because of this, leaning into the walls in order to prop themselves up. And still, despite the uneven feet, the killer's behavior appeared meticulous and calculated. They did not seem rushed at all, which suggested it wasn't an impulsive crime, but rather a deliberate act. Someone who knew what Missy was doing and that nobody else was going to show up there for at least another 30 or 40 minutes. Now, this fueled theories that it was a personal attack rather than a robbery. The choice of tactical clothing and the use of the hammer as a weapon made it clear that the killer was prepared for what they were about to do. On top of that, the force with which the hammer had been used indicated a clear intent to cause harm. So ultimately, it was determined that the killer was breaking glass and smashing locks to make it look as though it were a robbery gone wrong. However, the sole intention of this whole thing was to murder Missy. But who and why would anybody want to do this? Initial evidence at the scene, such as fingerprints and traces of DNA, didn't provide conclusive leads for investigators. And they even tried to trace the killer's escape routes based on the footage and evidence at the crime scene, but that got them nowhere either. It was time to talk to those who knew her best to see if they could shed any light on who could have possibly been responsible. Interviews with her family and friends confirmed that Missy had no known enemies to speak of. Even though her family life was good by all accounts, well, they had to look into her husband Brandon, of course, to see if maybe things weren't as rosy as they appeared to everybody else. As it turns out, Brandon was far away at the time of the murder, all the way in Mississippi on a fishing trip. However, a few days after the killing, Brandon's father, Randy, would go on to bring a shirt with blood on it to the dry cleaners. Suspicions were piqued from that, though it didn't last too long. And for one, Randy himself was out in California when the killing happened. As for the blood, that came from a dog after he broke up a fight between two of the animals. And DNA testing confirmed the stain did belong to a canine and not a human. The Midlothian community didn't remain idle in all this. I mean, after all, there was a killer in their midst, so they wanted answers just as much as the police and Missy's family did. Despite the lack of progress in the investigation, the residents came together to support the family and seek justice. Vigils and acts of solidarity were organized, where tributes were paid to the victim and support was shown to her 3 daughters who lost their mother in such a brutal manner. And social media then became a key tool for spreading awareness about the case, with many people sharing information and urging anyone with potential leads to please come forward. And looking through Missy's own social media footprint, detectives did find something worth looking into further. And these were messages coming in across LinkedIn from an unknown male in the months leading up to her death. Now, the contents of what exactly those messages said have never been revealed, but they were described as being creepy and strange according to the police. This angle was followed up on, but clearly it was just another dead end. And even though they don't believe this person who wrote those messages killed Missy, the authorities still believe that Missy spoke with her killer in some form or another before she was killed. And they're adamant that she knew the perpetrator, even if they weren't well acquainted or even friends. That possibly this killer had an obsession or fixation at the very least, and acted out in a violent manner when they realized they couldn't be a part of her life.
Midlothian police released 2 new details in the fitness trainer murder investigation. Police are looking for this car seen on the morning Missy Bevers was murdered near the church where the crime was committed.
And one final peculiar piece of evidence emerged from a nearby SWFA outdoor store in the early morning hours of that fateful day. The surveillance footage from there showed a 2010 to 2012 Nissan Altima behaving suspiciously in the parking lot at just around 2 a.m. The car circled the lot, flashed its headlights, and parked in a secluded spot before leaving. Under normal circumstances, who would care about this? But given what transpired just a few hours later, that's pretty odd behavior worth looking into. Except once again, police reached a dead end on that front. Despite public appeals, the driver of that vehicle has never come forward, leaving its connection to the case uncertain. And So it's now been close to 9 years since Missy was murdered in cold blood in that church in Texas. The reality is that the investigation has made little significant progress. It's hard to believe given all the amount of footage available, but that's where this case remains at the moment, cold and unsolved. While authorities continue to actively pursue the case, the lack of tangible evidence remains the biggest obstacle. The FBI and other agencies have jumped in, offering their help, but so far, they've not been able to identify the suspect either. In their efforts to solve the crime, authorities have repeatedly emphasized the importance of receiving any information that could lead to the capture of the perpetrator, offering a substantial reward of $150,000 for tips that could help resolve the case. So, if you have any information whatsoever, please reach out to them. What is perhaps most perplexing about this whole crime is the possibility that maybe the perpetrator had no prior connection to Missy in any way, as the police believe. They don't know that for sure, and if this hypothesis proves true, it would help explain why they can't find any evidence linking Missy to this person. And maybe this was just a deranged individual who entered the church with the intention of committing a robbery, or even just vandalism. When Missy showed up in front of them, the fatal confrontation occurred. Police were forced to investigate all individuals who had contact with Missy prior to her death. And this included reviewing her cell phones, emails, and social relationships to determine if there was any conflict or reason that could have motivated the attack. However, when all close circles of Missy, including friends, family, and colleagues, were ruled out as potential suspects, well, this further helped raise the theory that maybe they were looking at the wrong angle, and that this was in fact random. Brandon, Missy's husband, has spoken publicly where he has discussed the events leading up to Missy's murder, the anguish he felt when he received the news of her death while out of town, and the difficult experience of being considered a suspect at the start of the investigation.
They had to take a look at me, and they did, and that got really, really crazy. I mean, insane.
Although he has faced intense scrutiny from both the media and authorities, his primary goal has always been to provide any useful information that could help resolve the case.
I did get to hug my children and cry with them for a little bit, but there was so much stuff going on around the house, a lot of people.
The Bevers family has maintained their dignity, although clearly affected by the tragedy. Brandon shared with the public how the family has had to endure rumors and speculations about their possible involvement in the murder, facing constant pressure while trying to maintain normalcy for their children. And despite the difficulties, Brandon and his family have relied on their faith.
You've got to believe in something greater than yourself or greater than the pain, and it has to be the God Almighty.
A recurring theme in all of his statements has been Brandon's belief that the murder was a random act, which contrasts what the authorities think, who still suggest it likely was a premeditated crime that was targeted specifically at Missy. And this case has left a deep mark on everybody involved, from the Bevers family to the residents of Midlothian, and now on to you. A reminder that we never know when our time is going to come, and that there are crimes that, for reasons unknown, occur with no real rhyme or reason, and they just happen. And so that's it for this week's episode of Everytown. Hope you all enjoyed it. And check out some more of our videos right here, and for exclusive episodes that are dark and you can't find anywhere else, check us out on Patreon for a free trial with a library of over 200 additional episodes. Remember to come back next week for another one filled with scary, strange, and mysterious stories, because you never know. Maybe your town will be next.